Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. My host, JP, John Poz. With me today, a very special guest, former All Japan Tag Team Champion, NWA National Tag Team Champion. He was a champion in Portland. He's a very famous territory wrestler, Mr. Jerry Oates. Welcome in. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
So what's going on in your world? What have you been up to? Anything wrestling related going on?
No, not really. If you see the left side of my face, I had surgery 3 weeks ago, and I'm still kind of bruised up from that. But I'm doing well. I'm doing well. As far as wrestling, I hadn't done anything. Well, I had my last match in 2010. So, as far as me actually, involved in anything, I haven't been.
Any signings or anything like that, or any get-togethers?
No, I really don't go to them. It's not that I've been invited to some shows. I've been to a few, smaller shows around here, but I really don't. I'm not involved in any which way.
So do you follow current wrestling at all? Do you watch any current wrestling?
I hadn't watched wrestling in 15 years.
Wow, damn.
I'll tell you when I stopped watching WWE, WWF, whatever you want to call it. When Steve Austin left, I was through watching it. I mean, and then the stuff today, I mean, I couldn't tell you who's up there and who's not. And, I just, as you go through life, everything changes, and of course that changed from what we did, we were in towns every week, the same towns every week, and no matter, of course, they were called territories, and so the way they do it today, they may come to my hometown, Columbus, Georgia, and not come back for a year and a half, so it's just totally different, I'm just, as much as I love what I did, I'm not interested in that.
So you were a big Steve Austin fan at one point.
Yeah, I loved his work. Very hard worker in that ring. He worked his butt off in that ring. He was a hard worker, and I enjoyed watching him. He gave it his all. What was his run? 6 or 7 years up there?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Just about.
Yeah, somewhere in that area. And he's all banged up, beat up like the rest of us, But I'm not grumbling about that, I knew early on in my career that I wasn't going to be able to do that forever. You think when you're out there 26, 27 years old on main events everywhere you go, you think this will never end. And then you get hurt. In 1976, I had my first knee surgery. And then down the road, another one, and then another one, and then another one, then elbow surgery, then shoulder surgeries, I'm not complaining about that because I do it all over again. That's how much I loved it. That was the way I made my living, and I loved it. I've wrestled in the Superdome. Of course, in my heyday, there was no pay-per-views or anything like that, of course. But yeah, I wrestled in the Superdome in New Orleans, and that was an honor. But if I, like here in Georgia, we used to wrestle. We started wrestling at the Omni in 72 or 73 when they built the Omni. I was on the first card they ever had here in Atlanta. I mean, here in Georgia at the Omni, and I was green when I'd only been in the business 2 or 3 years, but I happened to be on that card, and in front of 17,000 people. That was a big deal back then, and we ran Atlanta every week, my hometown every Wednesday, Savannah every week, Macon, Albany. It was a two towns a night territory here in Georgia. When I was in the Carolinas, it was 3 towns a night. So what I'm getting at is I wrestled just as hard in front of 17 or 18,000 people as I did if 500 were there. I figured they paid their money and I wasn't going to lay down. We just gave it our all. because, you sitting in the dressing room, and later on, as you get experience and you get better and you get some trips under your belt to Japan, and you're sitting in a dressing room, and if you're on the main events every night, everywhere you go, guys are looking at you. They want your spot, So
Yep. Oh yeah.
I'm not saying I was the greatest wrestler out there. That anybody that says they are or were is, that's neither here or there. But nobody worked any harder in that ring than I did, because I had that much pride in what profession I was in and the business I was in. And that's just how I produced,
Absolutely. So were you always a fan though? Like, what kind of made you want to get into the business, even like to begin with?
I'll tell you a quick story. The love of my life growing up was baseball. And when I was growing up, the New York Yankees were on CBS every Saturday. That's just the way it was. So I tried out for Little League and never played any organized baseball in my life. So I go, and they had tryouts, and I made this team. So the first day at practice for the team I was picked, that don't mean you was going to make it. The manager asked me, he said, "What position do you want to play?" I said, "I want to be a catcher." He said, "A catcher?" He said, "Have you ever caught before?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Go put on the gear." And it was a natural to me. It was just natural to me. A guy in front of you swinging a bat right in front of you, that didn't affect me. And so my last year in Little League, I made the All-Star team. We beat everybody in my hometown. We went to Atlanta and got beat the first game because one of the manager's sons, not our original All-Star team manager, could make it. Another manager made it, and his son was pitching, and he would take him out, and they were tearing him up. And we got beat and went home, and I cried like a baby. I wanted to win that state tournament so bad. So then I go off to middle school, and I started playing football. But while I was playing Little League, I was a catcher for my seventh grade team. So I'd play a softball game, and my teacher would take me from the softball game back to my Little League game. Man, my Little League manager would be so mad. I already played one game of softball, now I'm playing baseball. And so, I was getting run down, and then I caught a cold. And, I went off to a middle school, and I tried out for the football team, made that. And then I got sick. I got a cold, and the infection went into my kidneys, and I wound up having nephritis. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
So I woke up one Sunday morning, and I was all swollen and bloated. And so my mother, she said, "I'm taking you to the doctor right away." He was there on Sundays back then. She took me. He looked at me and said, "It's his kidneys." So he took a sample, and he told her what I had. So I had to be bedridden for 7 weeks. I couldn't get out of bed. All I could have was, like the first week, 2 pieces of dry toast and water. So, I'm at the growing stage, and now I'm not growing. I'm not developing, bulking up or like I should. But I beat that. And then Babe Ruth League came around. And I was in no shape at all. But they knew who I was, and I was a catcher, and so I tried out, and I made the team. So this manager we had, he was brutal about running. And so I already had a uniform. I played one game, and I told him, I said, "Coach," I said, "if you just give me a little bit longer to get in better shape," I said, "be all right." I said, "I just can't do all that running that we're having to do." The man told me, he said, "If you can't keep up with the rest of them, bring me my uniform back." So I did. Never played baseball again. So I get to high school. Well, in the meantime, after that, my sister marries a wrestler. So while I was sick with that nephritis, the only wrestling we had back then was wrestling out of Chicago. You ever see any tapes out of old amphitheater out of Chicago?
Oh, yeah.
Watching that, I said, "I think I'd like to do that." But I used to go to the matches when I was younger here in town. And so my sister married a wrestler, and went from there.
So how do you kind of break in though? How do you break in through him, through The guy your sister was dating?
Dick Steinborn. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
And his dad was Milo Steinborn, who at one time was the strongest man in the world. So my sister and him they lived in Orlando, and I lived here in Columbus. They were home for Christmas. And so I got him off to the side, and I said, hey, Dickie, I want you to train me to wrestle. He said, you want me to train you to wrestle? It was hard to get in back then. I mean, it was hard. If you didn't know somebody, you wasn't getting in. And so he said, you want to get in the wrestling game? I said, yeah. He said, well, how am I going to train you? You living here in Columbus, Georgia, and I'm in Orlando, Florida. 3 months later, I was in Orlando, Florida. So I was down there about 6 months, and I was going to the gym, working out, boom, boom, boom. So I asked him, I said, when are you going to start training me? His answer was, when I'm ready. He wanted to see if I really wanted to do this, because this is a commitment, it was a commitment. So he finally called me one Sunday evening. He said, get your stuff on. He said, we're going to work out. I said, we're going to lift weights. He said, no, we're going to get on the mats. And it started from there. That's how it started. And he was a great teacher. I know when I had my first match, of course, he went and he was on the card. He was still wrestling. On the way home, he didn't tell me everything I did good. He told me everything I did wrong. I mean, it's a learning experience like anything else. And he was a great teacher. I had a great teacher. And it went from there. It went from there.
Was Florida your first major territory with Eddie Graham? Was that kind of how you break in?
Eddie was running it, and Louis Tilley was the booker. I don't know if you ever heard of Louis.
Yes. He
gave me my first match. My first match was in Fort Myers, Florida, with Duke Kiyomuka. And I was so nervous. I didn't even remember walking to the ring. I was horrified. I'm getting in there with a veteran, and then I would start having matches on the weekend and blah blah blah. And so I finally told my brother-in-law, I said, see if Louis will start me full time. So he did. And you wrestle in Miami and Jacksonville and Orlando, and and that was great. When I started, Briscoe was there. Briscoe hadn't been in the business that long. Bob Roop had just come out of the Olympics. Hiro Matsuda was there. Jose Lothario. I mean, it was just loaded with talent, because especially in the wintertime, the guys from up north, or in the summertime, the guys from up north would come down there, be down there 3 months for a vacation. It was a vacation. The talent came from everywhere. I mean, it was full of talent, just full of talent. And I got to wrestle, different guys, different styles, just I was in awe of the guys that were there. It was unbelievable.
When you're there, how is Eddie? Like, how is Eddie Graham, and how is the territory?
He was the boss. I've never seen a mind like that on anybody for the business. I mean, his mind, he was unbelievable. He was just, I mean, everybody looked up to him. I mean, he had issues like everybody else with his drinking, but yeah. he was still the man. He ran it the way it should be run. Be in Tampa, I mean, when I was down there, not because of me, of course, because I was just starting out in green as grass, but everywhere we went, it sell out. It would sell out. It was packed. It just, it was just absolutely unbelievable. You had so much talent to work with. Ronnie Garvin was there. I couldn't name you all the guys that were there. It was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Missouri Mahler was there. I mean, they just had talent from all over the country there. Then I left there, and we came up here to Georgia, of course, my home state, and stayed here a while. And Tom Ernesto, you know who that was?
Yes.
He was the booker here.
One of the assassins?
Yeah, absolutely. And what a mind he had on him. And it was just, that's when Tim Woods was here, Mr. Wrestling. I mean, it just sold out everywhere. Then wrestling, well, I'll tell you who, no. Yeah, Tom was doing the booking here when I got here, but the booker before him was Leo Garibaldi. And him and my brother-in-law broke in at the same time. They were 17 years old back in the day. And he told me, he asked Leo one time, he said, how do you have sellouts everywhere you go? He said, I got great talent. It took talent, you know. And, you know, when you run towns every week, you got to move the guys around on the card, you know, because nobody wants to. And then Buddy Colt was here, Billy Spears, Roberto Soto, Bill Dromo, Barb Armstrong. I mean, it was just loaded with talent, just loaded with talent.
When you're kind of going along, how long does it take you to go from, like you said, a scared, nervous rookie at that point? How long does it take you to kind of get comfortable and be a good pro? Because I always get different answers from different guys. It could take longer than I would kind of think before you get comfortable in the ring.
Well, I've been blessed all my life. Not that I hadn't had ups and downs, but I've been blessed. I had a great teacher. And then when we came to Georgia, he was wrestling full time then, my brother-in-law. And we traveled together every night, every day. And that's all we talked about from the time we left home till we got to the arena. If we was coming back home or going somewhere else to spend the night, that's all we talked about, you know. And he told me, he said, you know what you need to do? He said, you need to go out and watch every match. And not that you steal anybody's moves or try to imitate them. He said, pick something you like from like Dory Funk or Jack Briscoe or whoever, and just watch what they do and how they do, the response they get and how they do it. And he said, then you roll it all into yourself. Do it your way. And you learned a lot by watching. I did. I did. Just watching other great talents work, you know. And and then I only been in the wrestling game 2 years and got booked in Japan. That was unheard of. Usually 5, 6, 7 years before you get up. But I got to Japan the first time in 2 years. So that was an experience. I'll never forget the night we landed, checked into the hotel. I go out on the street by myself in Tokyo. I said, here's a guy from Columbus, Georgia. Been doing this 2 years, and I'm in Tokyo, Japan. I mean, it was like, it don't get no better than this, you know, because I love what I was doing. I thoroughly loved it. I loved it.
How'd you get booked in Japan? Is that through somebody, through the office of Georgia or something?
My brother-in-law.
Oh, okay. Nice.
You know, this life is not what you know, it's who you know. You know? But he said, you can handle it. You can handle it. And there's a culture shock now. They don't play either. They're tough. I mean, you talking about working hard. It was brutal. It was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. But I learned a lot, got a lot of confidence. You know, I came back from Japan, and my first night back in the territory, I was booked in Augusta, Georgia. And I had old timers come out there to watch my match. They said, he's picked up something over there. Let's see what he picked up. And there was a guy on that tour with me. His name was Charles Verholtz. He was from Belgium. He had some moves I'd never seen before. And I snagged a couple of those moves. They said, oh, yeah, he learned something while he was gone. You know, you pick up, you know, I'd never seen. He had a couple of moves that I'd never seen before. Of course, they work a little different over in Europe than we do. You know, they work right side, left side. It don't matter, you know. But I picked up a few moves from him.
When you're in Japan, though, you like that style? Yeah,
they're rough. I mean, they're rough. And Danny Miller, you know who Danny Miller was?
Sounds familiar.
Danny Miller, his brother was Big Bill Miller. His brother, Bill Miller, was a veterinarian in Columbus, Ohio. Big man, big. He'd been a college wrestler, you know, so he could take care of himself. But Danny was on that tour. Danny and Curtis Iakea. You heard Curtis?
Yep.
He was on the tour. And learned a lot hanging around those guys. And, you know, I was just being me. You know, I got along with everybody in the business. I never had any trouble anywhere with anybody, whether it was Bruiser Brody or Stan Hansen or just that was the way I made my living, you know, and I'm not going to let anything or anybody interfere with what I love doing, So it was a great life for me. It wasn't for everybody. I know one of the guys on my first tour, his name was Terry Gibbs. I don't know if you ever heard of Terry.
Oh, God, yeah. Yep.
He said, I'm never coming back to Japan. He hated it. He hated it. But I loved it. And I went back many times and started going. I went for international then. And then I was on international's last tour. Then I started going for Baba, which Baba, I love working for him. I mean, first class organization. When the tour was over, your money was there. They come count that money out in them $100 bills. You didn't have to worry about nothing with them. Put you in first class hotels, and you leave the country, you got a round trip ticket. So it was a dream come true for me. I lived my dream. I lived it.
How did you get booked with Baba? How did you make the switch over?
How did I get over there with Baba? Oh, I'll tell you. Wait a minute. The first time I went for Baba. Yeah. No, it wasn't the first time I went for Baba. I forgot how I got over the first time. So my brother and I were in Kansas City together. Did great out there. I loved it out there. So we came back to Georgia. And the last night in Des Moines, Iowa, I hurt my knee bad. Hadn't had any problems yet. This is 1976. Well, I hurt it in 75. We came back at the end of 75. We came back here. All of a sudden, we're the Georgia Tag Team Champions. So, I mean, we're wrestling every team there is. I mean, 7 nights a week. And so my knee's getting worse and worse and worse. So I told the office, I said, I got to have knee surgery. I said, so we worked a big deal with Pak Song on TV. That guy, unbelievable. That was on a Saturday, and Wednesday I had my knee operated on. That's before the scope. And Dr. Andrews, I'm sure you heard of him. Dr. Andrews, the orthopedic surgeon. He put me up in 2 places, in the front of my knee and on the side. And so right before that, Jim Barnett called me at home. He said, my boy, he said, they want you and your brother in Japan. I said, well, look, I said, I got to have my knee operated on. It was 9 weeks before we go to Japan. So I have my knee operation, and I'm rehabbing the heck out of it. I mean, I just don't wait till I go to rehab. I bought me a thigh extension machine, had it in my house. I'm exercising like crazy, walking on tracks, the track near my house. I'm getting in shape. So I told Dr. Andrews, I said, I'm going to Japan 9 weeks. He said, I don't know about that. So I said, I'm going. So a few days before I leave to go to Japan, he checked me out. He said, it's going to be sore, but I went. And I couldn't believe this. This is 76 now, for internet and all that stuff. Go through customs. They got that big, gigantic bus waiting on us. And Joe Iguchi, did you know who Joe Iguchi was?
Yep.
The head referee of it, great guy. As soon as we go through customs and walk out of the terminal to get on that bus, first thing he said, how's your knee? I'm going, what? How do you know about my knee?
Right,
I don't know how they knew it. They knew it. I said, it's good. He said, okay. He said, I'll let Baba know. So the next night we wrestled, they put me with Jumbo Tsuruta. You knew Jumbo was.
Oh, one of the best. Yep.
Unbelievable. I saw a match with me where Bockwinkel and I wrestled him and Terry Funk in Japan. That's the first time I'd ever seen it this week. Never seen that match in my life. But anyhow, so the next night they put me with Jumbo. I'm going to go 30 minutes. They was checking me out to see if I could go. I wasn't good of air shape as I should have been because I hadn't wrestled in 9 weeks, but I made it. The next night in Tokyo, they put belts on us. It was unbelievable. It was absolutely unbelievable. We rocked and rolled there for a month. Then my brother screwed that deal up.
How did he do that?
So I I got a poster here I could show you. The top guy from, other than the Japanese, they usually brought 6 or 7 guys over. The top single guy was Butcher. The top tag team was my brother and I on these big posters. So we're rocking along. We're having matches, unbelievable matches. So Joe Iguchi, they're very respectful, honest people. So he comes to me and says, Oki Kintaro, who promoted South Korea, he was Korean. He said, when this tour's over, he wants you and your brother and Abdullah to come to Korea. I said, unbelievable, great. So I told my brother, he said, Korea? I said, yeah. We going there for a week. Same money, they pay everything. Food, hotels, everything. They go fly us to Korea or fly us back to Tokyo, then we're coming home. He said, I'll let you know. I said, you're going to let me know? I've been out of work 9 weeks prior to this, right? I said, you're going to let me know? Yeah, I'll let you know. So a couple of days go by. Joe Iguchi said, Headbutt has to know. That's what he brushed Headbutt Oki Kintaro. He said he got to know. So he rocked along. Then he finally told me, he said, tonight he's got to know. To send publicity back to Korea, right?
Yep. So
I asked him, I said, what have you decided to do? He said, I'm not going. I said, you're not going. Here I have been out of 9 weeks. They're taking care of us unbelievable. And we're going to be set for years here because we're real brothers like the Funks were. The Briscoes, I don't know if they ever went together or not. I can't say. But we were the right age. We could have gone for the next 15, 20 years. We'd have been in like Flint, man. He said, I'm not going. I said, you're not going. I said, why aren't you going? He said, I'm going to fly my wife to Hawaii the night we finish up here. I said, you're not going. He said, nope. Just as cold. So I told Joe, he said, let me go tell Oki. He came back, he said, okay, you and Butcher going as tag team, and there was a guy on that tour named Johnny Gray from Australia. They took him in my brother's place, but we never wrestled together. So I go to Korea, come back, get home, land here 9:30 in my hometown. My brother says, I get off the plane. He said, we don't have a job. I said, we don't have a job. He said, no, Barnett got rid of us while we were gone. What he did while we were gone, Barnett knew all this. I know you've heard stories about him.
Oh, yeah.
Jim Barnett.
Yep.
While we were gone, the reason he didn't want my brother and I here, I mean, I've been in the business long enough now. I'm not watching Steve. My father-in-law at the time promoted Savannah, Georgia. He'd been doing it since the 50s. Savannah, Georgia. He had Statesboro, Georgia. He ran Jekyll Island. He had a lot of spot shows, good hot spot shows on the east side of Georgia. That was his. Over here in Columbus, Fred Ward was the promoter. He ran Columbus, Macon, Albany. That's 3 great towns. And so my brother was married to Fred Ward's granddaughter. We were too tight into promotions, but we wasn't interested in promotions. We were young. We wanted to wrestle all over. I did. And so while we were going to Japan, he fired Ernesto and hired Ole to be the booker. But Barnett told me, he said, when y'all come back, he said, things will be great for you. He said, they'll be different. I didn't know how different. They were so different, we didn't have a job. Yeah. So my brother tells me that night at the airport, he said, Bill Watts wants you to call him. I said, I'm telling you right now, I'm not going to Louisiana. You've heard about those trips from guys, right?
Long miles, right?
1,000 miles a week. I said, I'm not going. So the next morning, my brother's father-in-law called me because he worked for his father-in-law, Fred Ward. He said, Bill wants you to call him. And Bill did some booking here before I left, before I went to Japan. And I had a mother-in-law that was sick, and he told me, he said, I know your mother-in-law's sick. Just, it's time for you to go, but don't worry about it. Just stay until you think things are right. And he took care of me. So I said, I'll call him. I said, I'm not going out there. I'm not going. I landed here on like a Tuesday night. So I called him Wednesday morning. He said, you just got back, huh? I said, yeah, I got back last night. He said, I'd love for you to come out here. I said, Bill, I said, I've heard about those trips. He said, well, let me tell you about the trips. He said, we have long trips. He said, I'm not going to doubt. I'm not going to deny it. But there were long trips in Kansas City too, but not like this. So I said, I don't know. I said, I'd have to think about it. He said, I tell you what. He said, if you'll fly it here Friday, I just got home. He said, if you'll fly it here Friday and do TV for me Saturday, do 2 tapings for me Saturday, and then you can make up your mind. And he told me on the phone, and he and I always got along great. A lot of guys hated working for him and Ole. I love working for both of them. If you did your job, you knew where you stood with them. And if you didn't, that's on you. They ran it like a business, and that's what it is. It's a business. A lot of guys just took it, we wrestle it. It's a business. You got to put butts in seats to make money. So I said, I'll fly out there. He said, I'll pick you up at the airport. He picked me up at the airport. He took me to dinner, had me a room there by his room. He said, we will leave here in the morning, go to TV, meet the guys. I get there. Murdoch's there. Carl Cox is there. Who else? I mean, it was loaded. It was loaded with talent. And I did the 2 tapes. And he's taking me back to the airport. He said, what do you think? I said, well, I like the guys. He said, you're concerned about the trips? I said, yeah. He said, I'll tell you how this is going to work if you come to work for me. You're going to be on top. You're going to be my champion, and I'll help you with plane tickets here and there. And I said, okay. He said, you start in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I was in Louisiana. The first night I worked for him, it was on. 2 weeks ago we did 2 tapings. I did 2 tapings that Saturday, and that night I was in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. It was the day. 2 days after Thanksgiving. Well, he had a big Thanksgiving show in Louisiana. Ken Patera was there. He didn't show up for the Thanksgiving show, so I'm the first one in the dressing room. I was always early. So Bill and I in the dressing room, we talking, blah blah blah. And I went to the town by myself. Ken Patera walked in. He said, there's no need to unpack your bag. Patera said, what are you talking about? He said, you missed the show Thanksgiving. He said, well, I some story, I missed a flight. I couldn't get there. He said, you're done. So Ken turned around and walked. I said, good God, he just fired an Olympic champion. What chance do I have?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so
wow.
He run him off. And then let me put it to you like this. He did everything he said he was going to do for me. And the trips were long, but I knew getting in this business, everything wasn't going to be hunky-dory everywhere you went. But after you got used to it, and the talent there, I usually drove. I didn't like going to a town. Wednesdays, we would do TV interviews on Wednesday. Then we would go to Jackson, Mississippi. And then that night we'd drive into New Orleans. We'd spend the night, 2 nights in New Orleans. I always wanted my own vehicle because I was going to get to a gym sometime while I was on the road, You had to get in the gym when you could out there. I mean, some days you couldn't get there. You physically couldn't do it because of the miles and where you were. But I enjoyed it. I stayed out there a little over a year. I loved it. Then I went to Oregon.
Now, when you're there, is that when you had all those NWA title matches with Harley Race? Was it in
Louisiana? For Bill, yeah.
Yeah. What was that like? World title shots against Harley Race, the man back then.
My first title shot was in '74 with Briscoe. I was nervous. wrestling Jack, his reputation. Nobody fooled Jack Briscoe. Nobody. I had some in Kansas City and Des Moines with Jack. Then I get to Louisiana. I had him with Harley. He was a dream to work with. He was an absolute just dream. I mean, he was unbelievable. And then, what after Jack had the title, I worked with. This is in 74, 75. So I wrestled Terry Funk in Kansas City on a Thursday night for the international title. And the winner of the matches go wrestle Jack Briscoe the following Thursday for the world title. So I beat Funk. I get that the next Thursday, thinking I'm going to wrestle Jack Briscoe. But the night before, Terry beat Jack in Miami. So I'm going to wrestle Terry again. He was something else to work with now. Terry was wild. But I got to work with Harley, Jack. Who else had the title? I think. The three of Terry, Jack, and who did I say? Harley.
Harley. Yep.
Yeah. After that, who beat? I think that was it. The guys that actually had. I worked with a lot of former. I even wrestled Luthez. I was horrified. Wow. I was green as grass on Atlanta TV. They said when he gets you, they're going for that double arm takeover, double wrist lock takeover. They said don't buck. He said because your shoulder's going to come out of there. I mean, he wasn't no joke. He was a very, very nice man, great guy. I even wrestled Pat O'Connor, Luthez, both the Funks. Who else? Of course, Baba. He had won the title and dropped it back. But
what about Flair?
I wrestled Flair one time. I wasn't. People always ask me, "Who's the best wrestler you ever wrestled?"
Yeah, who?
And I'm not talking about like Jack Briscoe, Pistol Man. Two-time NCAA heavyweight champion, never defeated in college. I mean, that speaks volumes. I wrestled Bob Roop, who went to the Olympics for wrestling. Wrestled a lot of Japanese guys that went to the Olympics for Japan. But to me, if you ever get a chance, watch matches between Jack Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. It's the most unbelievable thing. And I know the first time I wrestled Dory, I'd wrestled Terry, I don't know how many times, wrestled him in Japan. And Dory was on that tour, but he traveled with the Japanese. Him and Terry were like just megastars over there. They trained Jumbo. He went to Amarillo and Dory trained Jumbo. That's why Jumbo was so good. I know the first night I wrestled Dory, I mean, I was in awe. I've been in the business 20 years then. I was like a kid when I got in the ring with him. I didn't open my mouth. Whatever that man did was all right with me. So I saw him in the hall the next 2 nights later. I said, that's the first time I ever wrestled you. He said, I know we never wrestled before. I was so in awe of him. I mean, his work was just impeccable. I mean, it was just, didn't throw hardly any punches. You couldn't pick his match and Briscoe's matches apart. I mean, it was just, they clicked together. I think that's why Jack turned into a great worker, working with Dory. His timing was perfect. Everything he did was perfect. He was kind of I don't mean slow worker. He never got in a hurry, but everything he did was deliberate. I mean, he was just a master at it, just a master. And working with Harley, you knew he wasn't going to drop you on your head, and working with Jack, it's a business, and a lot of the guys you wrestled were reckless and didn't care, only worried about themselves. I called them bullies. I see them beat, green guys up on TV and just kick them in the face and split their lips. And I mean, what's that proving? who did you beat? You know, I mean,
Yeah.
just somebody trying to break in, and you know, I just that wasn't me. That wasn't my cup of tea. You know, it takes all kinds. We had great guys, had horrible guys. You know, like in anything. You know.
I have some old, 25 years old when I bought them, or 25 years ago when I bought them, these VHS tapes, and Funk versus Briscoe was on. I was like, let's see what the hubbub. They were awesome. Those old NWA title matches from the 70s. Like, oh my God, they would hold up today. Yeah, they were great.
I mean, when Jack would do that arm drag, he would plunge straight out. I mean, their matches were just, but they wrestled all over the country before Jack got that belt. They were grooming him because Dory was that good a worker, you know.
Yep.
And yeah, their matches were just. But you know, and then I went to Oregon. I enjoyed that. Went to the Carolina. One of
Did you like teaming with Jesse the Body Ventura in Portland?
Jesse, we first met Jesse in Kansas City. He got trained by Eddie Sharkey in Minneapolis, and he came down there, and he was so broke he couldn't buy a loaf of bread. We never charged Jesse any trans. We became, him and my brother, we became very good friends, and then he left and went to Oregon. He had a good run out there. Jesse was a good talker, talent, so. But you know, he looked the part and could talk.
Oh yeah.
And when we got out there, when I got out there, Snooker was there, Buddy Rose was there, Ed Wiskowski, who I'd worked with both of them before, worked with Ed, I don't know how many times in Kansas City. Who else was there? Dutch Mantell, of course. They had a lot of good talent. They had a lot of good trips. Don Owens was a very good pay man too. He paid.
That's very, very important, very key to these guys.
Yes. I know the reason I wound up out there, I'm wrestling Harley in New Orleans. And while we getting instructions, he said, they want you in Portland, Oregon. I said, what? He said, they want you in Portland. He said, they asked me if I'd see anybody that was worthy of coming out there. He said, I told them you. And he said, Don Owens has seen you on Atlanta TV. I said, I don't know about that, man. So anyhow, he said, come to my room in the morning. So I went to his room. He called Don Owens. He said, I got him on the phone. So I talked to Don Owens, blah, 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 blah. And I'm in Louisiana, right? Now we're talking about going to Portland, Oregon, right? Good gosh. So I don't know. So I told him, I said, I'll come out there. So I gave Bill my notice, Bill Watts. I came back home, got on the plane, flew all the way out there, bought a car when I got there, and I stayed out there. I was there 6 months. So my brother calls me. He's in Charlotte. That's when Charlotte was absolutely on fire. I mean, unbelievable. So he said, George Scott wanted me to call you. And he said he wants you to come to, he'd been there about a year, my brother. They was using him so. He said he wants, because that's a tag team territory, Charlotte was. He said, he wants you to come to Charlotte and he's going to team us up. I said, man, I've only been out here 6 months. I said, you talking about me coming back all the way across the country. Well, think about it. He said, call me tomorrow. So I called him. I said, all right. He said, well, let me tell George, and he's going to give you a start date. And I said, now, look, I said, I'm on the other side of the country now. I'm driving back. All right. So I got myself booked in Los Angeles because I wanted to say I wrestled at the Olympic Auditorium. And Leo Garibaldi's doing the booking out there. And he's known me since I was a kid. So I get out there, go to the Olympic that Friday, had to go get a physical and all that crap. So he said, and he introduced me to Mike LaBelle, who was running the territory. He said, hey, man, he said, would you be interested in staying? I said, I can't. I said, I've already got a starting date in Charlotte. Leo said, "Come on, man, stay. We'll take care of you." Good gosh. So I said, I can't. So I worked on never been to Los Angeles in my life. Worked on the main event that night with Piper. But I knew Piper when he was green, when he started. I knew him from Kansas City. We had a good match, and I left and went to Charlotte, and he teamed us up. And that money was unbelievable. I get there, Mulligan's there, Dick Murdoch's there, Wahoo's there, Flair's there, Steamboat. Was he there yet? Yeah, he had just gotten there. Gene Anderson, Swede Hansen, Rene Goulet. I mean, the talent. They ran 3 towns a night. There's some towns I never made, and some guys I never saw. But our slot. Oh, Paul Jones was there. But our slot was semifinal every night. We were the time getters if they needed time. George knew we could get the time. I mean, I'm just telling you. I'm not bragging on us. Whatever they needed, we could do it, and they knew it. And so we stayed up there. Oh, Ernie Ladd came in. Atlas was there. Patero was there. I mean, it was just talent. But every night we were on semifinals, and the money was unbelievable. The most money I'd ever made in the United States was up there. So my brother, he said, "Let's go home." I said, "To Russell?" I thought, no, let's. So what he did, he met a guy that had an auto dealing business, detail cars. I'd never been around nothing like it. So we started hanging around this guy. He said, "Let's go home." So my dad found us a building. We come home, bought this building. We still wrestling around here in Georgia. We had this business. People knew who we were from being here, and on TV, Columbus Live TV, wrestling, Atlanta TV. We had every dealer in town. We were doing 25 to 30 cars a day. We had a crew. But then that's when the interest rates went to 18%. People stopped buying cars. People wasn't trading cars. We were cleaning trade-ins, make them look like me. Man, we did everything to them, man. We had more business. We could shake a stick. Not in the business going heck in the handbasket. So I had some gym equipment I'd bought in Charlotte, and I had some that I had bought in when I was in Kansas City. I had Olympic sets and some benches and some bars and some dumbbells. So we come home. We had a big place where we did cars, and off to the side there was another building, and then there was upstairs. So I had my weights and all upstairs, and somebody said, "Hey, I heard the Oates brothers got it." My brother, he could have cared less about all that. Have a gym. So this guy came by one evening. He said, we was up there, me and a couple of guys were working out. He said, "I heard you got a gym." I said, "Well, I don't know if you call it a gym." I said, "I got an Olympic set. I got a curl bar. I got a few dumbbells. I got a tricep push down machine and a thigh extension leg curl machine." He said, "How much would you charge me to work out in here?" I said, $20. He said, he reached in his pocket, gave me $20. And he told another guy, another guy, another guy, another guy. So I moved it downstairs and started buying more equipment with the money I was making off the guys coming in. Started having some Oates Gym T-shirts made up, and I'm doing. My brother, he don't want nothing to do with it. So when the cars went to heck and back with the interest rates, he walked in one day. He said, "I'm out of here." He said, "I'm going to Florida." I said, "When are you coming back?" He said, "You don't get it. I'm not coming back." He said, "I'm done." "What do you mean you're done?" "I got this huge building by myself." I said, "Okay." Got his name off the building. I turned the whole place into a gym, and the rest was history. I was making money hand over fist. I had a pro shop. I sold protein shakes. I put on bodybuilding shows. I was still going to Japan. I was still wrestling. I was training guys. I was sitting here. How could this happen to me? It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. And I knew how to promote from being in the wrestling business. My bodybuilding shows, that wasn't the one I had didn't sell out. And I would have like anywhere from 15 to 22 competitors out of my gym, girls and guys, you know, bodybuilding. It was just unbelievable. It was just unbelievable.
When you think about your brother, was he older or younger? And did you guys really get along or not get along?
When it comes to the business, we got along great. Outside the business, no. He couldn't leave the women alone. You know, that was more important than. But when it comes to except for the Japan deal, I'm glad you mentioned that. To get back to that Japan deal, when I went back, they told me, they said, you know, your brother messed up a long-term business deal. I figured it up. We could have gone. What was I in 76? I was born in 47. You do the math. We could have gone another 15 years easy. And we'd have gotten 16 weeks a year and been in every big tournament they had. He said, Joe Iguchi said, he messed up, big deal for you guys. You know, they never mentioned his name again. He never went back.
Wow.
He never went back. We didn't get along. We don't get along to this day. He lives in Macon, but that's his choice. That was his choice. I mean, I love my brother, but being in business with him, it's horrible. And, you know, he just has to live his life and I live mine. You know, the Scott brothers didn't even ride in the same car together. Did you ever hear that story?
No, George and Sandy Scott?
I never knew why. I was going to find out why. I'm in Japan. So somebody took us out to eat, not connected with wrestling business per se, some businessman. So Dory Funk came along because he was American, and even though we wrestled him over there. So I asked Dory, I said, Dory, I got to know something. I never asked my brother-in-law. I don't know why. I said, what was the beef between Sandy and George Scott? He said, I'm fixing to tell you. About that time, Murdoch walked in. He was wrestling for Inoki. And I never found out. No, they didn't even speak. But Sandy worked up there when George was the booker when we was up there. He took care of some towns for the Crockett's, you know. But I never did find out why. Never did. Never did.
Crazy. What was your favorite territory that you went to?
I know this is going to sound sick. I loved everywhere I went. I did. I really loved Oregon. Ricky Hunter was there. I don't know if you knew Ricky. Mm-hmm. Dale Lewis was there. Dale wasn't working but once in a while. I enjoyed Kansas City. I enjoyed Oregon. Carolinas made more money there than anywhere, but I didn't like it. I don't know why. I don't know. I mean, they took care of us, but there was just something about it. And of course, here in Georgia, oh, you want to hear a horror story?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you a horror story. So Leo Garibaldi, I had known him since I was a kid because of my brother-in-law. And what a mind he had. So in the end of 1972, it was like December, I get a call from Leo Garibaldi. I'm here in Georgia. How you ran me down? I don't know. They probably called my brother-in-law because I told you they started at the same time back in the day. He said, Jerry, he said, this is Leo. I said, what's up, Leo? He said, you know, I'm out here in Dallas. I said, yeah, I heard you was out there. He said, I want you to come out here. I'm going, good gosh. This is the end of 1972. I've been in business 2 years, but he'd seen me work. He said, Fritz is going to retire. And he said he wanted me to find a young guy that can handle it and take his place. But Fritz in Dallas, right? Sure. So he said, I told him about you. He said he'd seen some of your matches on TV from Atlanta. And he told me to call you because he told me, so I know him. So I knew everybody knew my brother-in-law. And he said, see what he'll do. So he said, Fritz wanted me to call you and wonder if you'd come out here. But I didn't know that was kind of like three territory section of, the Funks ran the western part of Texas, and Fritz and Joe Blanchard and Paul Bosch ran the eastern part of Texas. So I said, okay, I'll come out there. He said, well, use you on top, take care of you, blah, blah, blah. Get out there, first night there, I'm working with Lanza. First night in, I got him flying all over that ring. About that time, Mulligan hits the ring in his cowboy hat and jeans and cowboy boots. I had him rocking and rolling, drop kicking him, slamming it. I'm over in one night. Leo told me what to do. He got me over. He was a young kid handling these big guys. I weighed about 2 1/4 then. Those people was eating out of my hand. I'm over like a fat rat first night. On Mondays, we worked in Fort Worth. Tuesdays, we worked in Dallas. Thursday, we went in San Antonio. Fritz ran Dallas and Fort Worth. Thursdays, we went to San Antonio. Joe Blanchard ran that. Then on Thursdays, we would go to Corpus Christi. And then Friday, we'd be in Houston. That was the territory. And Saturdays, they always had a spot show somewhere. Man, I'm over like a fat rat. I mean, now Joe Blanchard's not using me that good. I don't know why. I thought I was going to be used the same everywhere. Well, I wasn't. But I didn't know that. And then Joe Blanchard, did you know how St. Louis was run back in the day?
Mm-mm.
If St. Louis was run, they would bring like the Bruiser in, Wilbur Snyder. They would bring guys out of Florida that people knew, like Wahoo or Ernie Ladd, or, of course, the world champion was always there. Great houses. Bruno would come in. It was a town unto itself. That was St. Louis. That's how, and Sam Muchnick, that was his town. That's the way it was run. I mean, and that's the way Houston was run. Of course, a lot of Hispanics down there in Houston, right? So he'd bring Mel Mascaras in, different nationalities. Wahoo was big over down there. Ernie Ladd was big, but they bring in outside guys there. So it wasn't necessarily the crew that was in Dallas was going to be in Fort Worth on top. But I had some good slots there. And so the biggest night thrill I had, I was on a main event, a double main event in St. Louis. I wrestled Harley and Dick Murdoch wrestled Bruno. That was the 2 top main events. That's the first time I'd ever met Bruno. What a nice man. It was like you knew him forever, nice, polite, kind. But anyhow, so I'm out there 3 months in Dallas, doing good. Frankie Kane, Great Mephisto came in. I'm working him over every week. Just people are eating it up. But in the other towns, it's Fort Worth and Kansas, Fort Worth and Dallas. They used to be fantastic. I'm there 3 months. So this was we was in Dallas on that Tuesday night. So the next morning, it's Wednesday, and I'm going to go to San Antonio. So Leo called me at home. He said, you in San Antonio tonight? I said, yeah. He said, how about leaving about an hour early and come by the Sportatorium? I said, okay. I said, I'm just to get my notice. So, of course, Fritz wasn't there. So I go in. He said, come on, let's come out here and sit in the arena. Leo was a kind man, smart man when it comes to our business. He said, do you have any idea why I asked you to stop by here? I said, yeah, I got a good idea. He said, what is it? I said, you're supposed to give me my notice. He said, that is correct. And he said, this really bothers me. He said, I'm the one that called you and asked you to come out here. And I told you I was going to do for you what I said I was going to do, and I did it. He said, you got over? I said, no. You got me over. You got me over. And he said, why do you think that he wants me to give you your notice? He didn't even have the guts to do it, Fritz. I said, you got me over and he can't stand it. He said, that's exactly right. He said, when he hears Go Jerry Go on Tuesday nights, those people screaming your name, he said, runs him mad. He come out of retirement and I got to run off. So I came back to Georgia. That was my experience there.
That's experience with Fritz, not good.
A lot of guys had problems with him. I mean, I'll tell you another story. Everything I've told you, I'm not making anything up. There's no need, because you could look up anything I've told you. Said he's crazy. That didn't happen. I'm telling you straight. I don't believe in that. I've read some of the guys' books. I did a podcast for 10 years. It was called Peach State Pandemonium. The guys that I knew, Russell, all over the country, they call in with stories that stuff never happened. They beat this guy. They beat that guy. Come on, man. But anyhow, what was I going with the story? So I had trained several guys. I don't like telling this, but I trained Marty Jannetty.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Trained Marty right there in my gym. Went out there and made a fortune, and he's now, that's another story. You've heard stories going into that. Speaks for itself. Never begrudged him. I was proud that I trained him, and he made more money than I did because pay-per-views and dolls and stuff. But everybody has their time. It's like Mickey Mantle. Most of them made $100,000. They make more than that a game now, So you can't cry over that. So a guy I trained at my gym, I got him booked in Japan. He goes to Japan. They land on what night? Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I get a call about 6 o'clock about 4 o'clock in the morning. I answered the phone. He said, he's dead. He's dead. I said, I said, Thomas, is this you? He said, yeah. He said, he's dead. I said, Thomas, what are you talking about? And he was in Japan. He said, we found David Von Erich dead. They landed that night and they never saw him again. So they go get on the bus the next day to go wrestle. Joe Gucci, where's David Von Erich? So he goes back in the hotel, gets a guy to open rooms, on the bed, pills are everywhere. They said he had some kind of gastro power. But yeah, he did, swallowing too many pills. I mean, that's what it was. So they called Fritz. Did you know he wouldn't even come over there? Joe Higuchi told me the story. He said, to show you how honorable the Japanese were, they wasn't going to put a dead body that they from a guy they brought over there they found dead to load him up on a plane and send him back to Dallas by itself. Joe Higuchi got on that 747 and escorted that body back to Dallas. Wow. Fritz, he said Fritz wouldn't even come get his own son. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
not
crazy.
Afford it, but I mean, I can't imagine what those Japanese thought. They're such honest people, man. They're first class. I can't imagine what they thought. They're honorable. And then Joe got off that plane, caught the next thing back to Tokyo. You imagine that? He escorted the body back.
Yeah, that's crazy. Honorable for sure.
I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but that's a true story.
No, never.
It came out of Joe Higuchi's mouth. Came out of his.
That's crazy. So as we hit the wind down here and head towards the finish, did you ever work for WWF? Was it one shot? And did you actually work with Marty there or no?
Work with Marty?
Yeah.
Well, I trained him.
No, but in WWF, did you ever work against him? Did you ever make an appearance for the WWF?
Yeah, a couple of times. No, well, I'll tell you. Jay Strongwell was a road agent. And I'd been out there on the road with him, like in Detroit and places. When I had my gym now, I had my gym for 25 years, and I was still going to Japan. I was flying out here all the time, going back to Louisiana, going to Florida, going to Texas, going here, going yonder. And I started going to Detroit on Saturdays. I don't know if you've heard about that experience up there. So anyhow, I knew Jay from way back when he was Joe Scarper, when I was a kid, because of my brother-in-law. But anyhow, so the first time they came to Columbus, when they started jumping on, all the territories, they said, the guy that had the ring came by my gym, said, "Hey, the chief wants to see you tonight." I said, "Man, I ain't going down there." He said, "Man, come on down there. He wants to see you." So I get down there to the auditorium here. Of course, it's packed to the rafters. It's their first trip here. I walk in the dressing room. He said, "Did you bring your gear?" I said, "Bring my gear for what?"
Huh.
We're short a guy. I said, "Man, I don't want to work. Go get your stuff." I said, "Come on, man." So I didn't live far. I was back in about 25 minutes, 30 minutes. He said, "Get your stuff on." I worked with Mike Sharp. You ever know him?
I heard Mike. Oh, yeah.
Like working with a cement mixer. So anyhow, I worked with him and blah, 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 blah. And that's the only time I ever worked for him. And then I'd called Jesse when he was up there. And it was the summertime. And I had a bodybuilding show coming up. So I told Jesse, I said, "Jesse," I said, "get me booked up there." But I didn't know they stayed on the road like that. I couldn't do that and have my gym. My gym was making too much money. I wasn't gonna be on the road again like that. So he said, let me talk to Pat Patterson. So I had met Pat when he came through here before. He'd only stayed here a short time. I mean, he'd come to see, I don't know, Briscoe or somebody. So anyhow, so he called me on a Friday, like Friday at noon. He said, "Hey, Jerry, this is Pat Patterson." I said, "Hey, Pat." He said, "I need you in Detroit tonight." I said, "You need me in Detroit tonight?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "That's in your ticket." I said, "Look," I said, "Pat," I said, "I got a bodybuilding show next Saturday and I got to be here all week." He said, "Well, come on." I said, I can't. Because I made money on the bodybuilding show. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what." He said, "Call me when that thing's over next week." But I never called back. Later on, he took guys that wrestled for the NWA. I'm talking about Vince, and make clowns out of them. Terry Taylor, the Red Rooster. There's no way I'd have done that.
Right.
Made Dusty Rhodes the pizza delivery boy. Just he did it because he could, But I couldn't have done that. I had too much respect for the business, and I just couldn't have done that. But I tell you what, I wouldn't take nothing for what I did. But when the wheel went really round for all that gigantic money, I mean, I was ahead of that. So, but I don't begrudge any of those guys, and most of them don't have it now anyhow. They thought it'd never end. You ever watch Inside the Ring?
Yeah, all the time. Yep.
You can't believe you can't believe what happens. The one I saw with Vader, which I never knew, and like Brody, who I knew Brody when he was still a mark in San Antonio. They think they're bigger than the game. They think they're bigger than the game. I know when Brody was working for Vern, they had sold Denver out. Sold it out on the afternoon. Buckwinkle told me, and another guy told me that was up there. Vern's looking for Brody. He's on the main event. Can't find him nowhere. They say, "Anybody seen Brody?" Say, "We ain't seen him." I don't know where they were the night before, or flew in from Minneapolis, or whatever, how they did it. He calls his house. Brody answers the phone.
Oh my God.
Vern said, "What are you doing at home?" He said, "How's the house?" Vern said, "It's sold out." He said, "Good luck." And I'm not. Can you imagine that?
Crazy.
What
was he doing? He just went to place.
Doing it because, see, he was locked into Japan too. But there's no telling what he'd have made in Denver. $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000. I mean, just so how can you trust somebody like that? You can't. And sure. What happened to him down there in Puerto Rico? But you don't wish nothing on nobody, but you got to know where I've always heard several stories that he had beat Jose Gonzalez up somewhere. Then I heard, I don't know if you heard this story. I heard somebody talking about it online that Brody bought in down there.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear the story?
Yep.
And whoever he told, he said, I'm going there and I'm not leaving there till I get my $25,000. I don't know if he figured they owed him 25 or he wanted his money back or he put 25 grand in there. I don't know the details. But I was in Puerto Rico with Carlos Colon. I'll tell you that in a minute. So something had gone south somewhere. Have you ever been down there?
Yeah, for vacation once.
So I was in Japan with Carlos. He said, man, yeah, I know what you're doing. He was on that tour with us. He said, you've never been to Puerto Rico for me. I said, no. He said, your brother-in-law, your brother? I said, yeah. He said, when we get back home, you call me the next day. I got back on a Tuesday. So I called him Wednesday. He said, can you come Friday? I just got back from Japan. I said, yeah, I'll come down there for a week. Well, sir, that's the most dangerous place I've ever been in my life. Dangerous. They told me don't wear any jewelry. Don't walk on the streets at night by yourself. I'm going, what? It was dangerous. I was there a week and I didn't go back. I said, I don't need this. You know, it was dangerous. They drew a lot of money down there. Butcher drew a lot of money. Stan, Brody. But, you know, some things aren't worth it to me. You know,
Absolutely, yeah.
It just wasn't worth it to me. But yeah, I went to Arabia, you know, Far East, Middle East, Korea. You know, I miss it to this day, but you know, those days are gone. I miss what I knew, you know, of the business. You know, it was a tight knit bunch of guys.
For sure. Now, is there anywhere on social media or anything where people can find you, or you don't really do any social media or anything like that anymore?
Book, where else? What's the other one? Instagram, do a little stuff. You know, I have, you know, I have a lot of fans that, you know, call me or for different things. How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. But that social media thing, that's about all I do. I had you know, when I saw the movie The Wrestler, did you see that movie?
Oh yeah, Mickey Rourke.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I've always been a private person. I mean, not that I'm anybody or anything, but when I saw that movie at the end, the guys all out of shape and on oxygen tanks and trying to sell a picture. And, you know, I've never sold a picture in my life. I give them away. Autograph them and give them away. I've had people call me and want an autograph picture. I said, you got to pay postage on those things like $9. I said,
Yeah.
I'll send them to you. I'll do that. I'll sign them. Don't charge for the pictures, stuff like that. I'm not going to sit around at some table look like, you know, I'm broke and didn't make any money and I'm trying to sell a picture. That's just me. I just don't do that. Probably should, but I don't. You know, probably should,
You
but
could and should, yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't take anything for all the miles I did and all the rings I wrestled in and the guys I met. And, got to meet a lot of. I know I'd been. Joe Louis refereed a match here one night. You know, I never got a picture with him. Joe Louis. I'm sitting right next to him in the dressing room. Joe Louis. I'm thinking, why didn't I get a picture with him? You know?
Yeah.
Jersey Joe Walcott. Met him. Nice guy. Didn't get a picture with me and Lou Thez. Just Lou Thez was a great guy. He was a great guy. He was a class act. He was strictly class act. He demanded respect when he walked in. It's just the way he carried himself, you know. He was who he was, and he could take care of himself. He was a nice man. Met a lot of great people. Just then a lot of jerks, just like in anything else. But yeah, it was good to me. It was good to me. Very good.
Awesome stuff. Jerry Oates, thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it. Awesome time kind of going down memory lane, reliving memory lane. So
I
great
hope
stuff.
but I want to thank you for having me. That I feel honored that you asked me. I want you to know that.
Hey, you've been everywhere. You've wrestled, obviously everywhere too. So awesome stuff.
But if you ever want me on again, I'll be glad to do it. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
All right, great. I feel like we were just scratching the surface, so definitely should have you back on. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, I could tell you some stories now that you wouldn't believe. I mean, I don't get on here and use profanity, and I just don't believe in that. That's not necessary. When I was doing podcasts, the guys would get on. I say, hey guys, I mean, a lot of kids, young people. I'm just, I guess, old school. I just don't think that's necessary. But if you ever want to have me again, I'd be more than honored to do it for you and with you, and you just let me know.
Awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Have yourself a great night.